Hello, everybody. So I am, as you heard, I'm Julie Kinney. I work at the Marathon County Public Library. I'm the Adult Services Librarian, so this is one of the fun things I get to do. I also get to do crafting and some other things, and of course answer people's questions when they call or come in. So today we're going to talk about genealogy basics with Ancestry. Make sure I've got the right one. Here we go. Perfect. You guys ready to jump down the rabbit hole? It is the most addicting thing in the world. I'm always really curious about who my ancestors were, what kinds of things were they doing, how were they living, so this is a great start. Before you leave today, I've got some goals for us to work towards. Hopefully you'll be able to identify some family members and learn how to fill out a basic family tree chart, describe how to perform a basic ancestry search, look at and identify some different records and use some of the information that you can find there. Identify what information is useful for using in Ancestry and some new sources for genealogical information. So we've got a lot to cover and I'm going to try and talk fast. The first question I always have for people is, what is genealogy to you? A lot of answers are things like, it's my family tree. Other people really want to know about their family. Who am I in relation to all of these other people? Other people want to know, are they related to someone famous? I know that's a big question for people. Where's my family from? Are they from this area? Are they from other places? How did they get to be here? And who are my ancestors? So those are just some questions that people come to with genealogy. Oh, and who am I related to? According to Wikipedia, genealogy comes from the ancient Greek. It's the making of a pedigree. And it doesn't just include making your family tree. In some cases, and if you come to the library, you can look at these, people have written beautiful narratives about their families, starting from when they maybe left Germany, all the way to their people that are living here in Wisconsin, in some cases even in Wausau. So it can be just your family tree, or it can be something more. So the first thing I want to talk about a little bit are the forms and charts that you can find in Ancestry. If you come to the library, we have Ancestry on our computers. You can log into it. Unfortunately, due to licensing, we cannot access Ancestry from home. During COVID, there was a time period where they were allowing that to happen, and unfortunately for us, that time period has ended. However, you can come to the library, and we are always happy to get you onto a computer. They have charts and forms that you can use and print off. It's totally fine. It doesn't have to be anything special. Some people like to keep a notebook. Some people like to keep their information online. It's just completely up to you. But these are the charts and forms that we're just going to take a quick look at. So the first one is sort of the typical family tree chart that you might see if you're just kind of starting out or looking in some other books. It starts out with your name, and then it starts to go back. So if you see way up there, I have a blue arrow that's pointing at that little box. What that little box means is that there's another family tree about that very top person where I'm going to go back even farther. So I kind of did a very fast example of what that looks like. So that's me starting there. I can go all the way back. That's my great-great-grandpa. And so if I start with my great-grandpa Irvin, I take him down and I can continue my family tree. So if you're doing it on paper and want to keep paper copies, this is kind of the way that you can use it with the paper forms. The other one that I like to point out is the family group record, which is a nice place to keep everything about one family together in one place. And it gives you, the thing I like to point out is that genealogists write the date as the day, the month, and the year. So you'll see quite a bit of that. This one allows you to attach children's names and a husband and a wife, talk about whether they were married before, where they maybe got married, where they died, etc. So this is one that I filled out for my grandparents. And one of the questions that I had, and we'll see their wedding announcement a little bit later in the presentation, but they were married at the First Reformed Church. I knew my great-grandma had her birthday at what is now Grace United over on 3rd Avenue. And so I just out of curiosity, I did a little searching on Google, and I found out that yes, that was the First Reformed Church. And they also happened to own the store across the street from that. So that made it kind of easy, and we'll actually see that building a little later. So the other thing that I like to tell people is to remember to keep track of what you found. Just like writing a history paper or a research paper, you want to keep track of where you found your information. It doesn't have to be on a form like this. It can be, just a note in a computerized record or something else that you do, but just to keep track. That's not to say that you can't go back and look, because oftentimes, even in Ancestry, things will get updated, new databases will be added, and you might find more information that you need. And then these are some of the other resources that are available through Ancestry. They have a really nice Getting Started page. They talk about the census, immigration, military, and some ethnic groups that you can look at, and those are all really good places. If you're just starting out and you don't know where to go next, these are really helpful. Okay. The Ancestry also has a toolkit that has all kinds of forms and articles and things on it, and I just put their website address up there. You can go there and download anything for their toolkit. So we're going to start in Ancestry. So if you came to the library and sat down and went to Ancestry, this would be what your opening page looks like. I always start with Begin Searching at the very bottom there. And before we get on, you will see, if you look at this Begin Searching page, they have all of these lists of all kinds of different things that you can look through. So things like tax, criminal, land and wills, photos, stories and publications, immigration and travel, military records, they're all there. But it's such an overwhelming mass of stuff that it can be really hard to find what you're looking for. So I start with the search. What they usually tell you is to start with a grandparent. So I always like to start with the first name, middle name, and last name, and then the other thing that's really important is the birth year. The birth year, if you guess, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be exact. It can be, within 10 to 15 years, and you'll still probably get some hits. So I have a nice filled out one this is for my grandpa, Donald D. Kinney. He spent, from what I understand, most of his life in Wausau, and I know when his birthday and when his birth year was, so I could punch that all in. Yep, and a place where you might have lived. So these are the results that we would get back. They might look a little different every time you do it, but you're gonna get something that looks very similar to this. So at the first, we have the census, you have draft cards, we have some public records, a couple of other things. So as we go down this list, I'm just gonna talk about each one a little bit and tell you what kinds of information you can find there. So we're going to start out with the federal census. The most recent census that's available is 1950. So most censuses are not released for 72 years after the date of the census. Apparently, to the people who do the census in the government, they figure 72 years is the average length span of somebody's life. So if we wait 72 years, most of the people that are here are maybe going to be passed away or dead. That's not always the case. You can still find people who are alive in the census. Some older census records were handwritten, which really makes it difficult to read sometimes. So be open to investigating other spellings of people's names, because often census takers went door to door. And if you weren't home, or your grandma wasn't home, or your great-grandma wasn't home, they might ask the neighbors, hey, who lives next door? How many kids do they have? What are their kids' names? And again, older census records only have the head of the household, and there's no other information about the family other than maybe there are 7 people living there. So, before we get to our actual results, sometimes what you'll see is on the right side of your results, you'll see all of these things. I like to think of these things over here as hints. If I wanted to go and look at the 1930 census with the Donald Kinney name in it, I can click on that and it will take me to that. It might not be the right Donald Kinney, but I can certainly check it out and take a look. Okay. So this is my grandpa, and this is what you will see when you get to the page about the census. If you click on it, what you'll see is you'll see something like this, where they have pulled everything out of the actual census, which is right there, and they've put it out here for you to just kind of read very quickly. And it's kind of fun to see. One of the things I like to look at is what were the occupations of people. In this case, I knew that my grandpa had several jobs. As you can see him, he was a milkman for Lemke's back in the day. But for this one, he was working as a bus driver. He also worked at Wisconsin Public Service, and he worked for the Maple Hill Credit Union back before it became Connexus. So there was a lot of other things that he did. This is just one snapshot in time. And if you click on the actual census record, you can see this is exactly what you'll get, is you'll get a page from the census and your family will be highlighted. So I'm just gonna make it bigger so you can read it, because it is handwritten and it can be kind of difficult to read. So you can see in the green, in the yellow is the person that I'm looking for, that's my grandpa, and underneath it are the people that lived in his household. One of the things I noticed is right above there is my great-grandma's name. And the person who did this census actually wrote in the street names for where the census was being held. So I know from family stories that my grandparents lived with my great-grandparents, and they actually lived in this house. So you can take what you learn, you can go out to Google Maps, and you can actually take a look at if that building is still there. The building isn't always there. I know where my grandparents from Milwaukee lived is now a parking lot. But in Wausau, surprisingly, there are still a lot of these buildings around that you can kind of get an idea for where your relatives lived. I do have a very funny picture of my grandma yelling at somebody outside of this house, so I'm pretty sure it's the same house. So that's kind of how you pull things together, and that's that. Okay. So this is an example of when census data goes wrong, or really what it is AI is the group, or you have an artificial intelligence that's reading these censuses and constructing these really nice pages. What's happened though is that they have a terrible time reading handwriting. And so this person happens to be this Gervin E. Kinney, actually happens to be my great-great-grandpa Irvin Kinney with an I. And you can see that the person who wrote the census sure made it look like a G. So this is one of those times when you'll get to this response and you'll be like, boy, that everybody else in that family group looks like they belong to my family, but this person, I'm not really sure. And so then you can go back and look at the actual census record and try and figure out what's going on there. And his middle name was Ellsworth, so if you can see, they did write EL after that, so I'm guessing. Here's another example of a census record where the AI has read the census record. And these are my, Fred and Mary, or Marie, are my great-grandparents, and then these are my grandparents living with them. You can see that it says Kinnen, K-I-N-E-N. And I was like, what is this? What kind of craziness is this? If you go back to the census record, I'm guessing that the people who did this census, and I don't know this for a fact, knew that my grandmother, Edna, was living with her parents, Fred and Marie, and they had just drawn the line thinking that her name was still the same last name, only to realize, oops, she's actually married. And so when they drew that line in there, the AI read it as an N instead of a Y. So these are just some of the things that you just want to be aware of as you start working your way through Ancestry. Or should I go back? I went back. This is an example of a very old census. In this case, this is my great-great-great-grandparents, my Gilbert Valliere, and you can see it tells how many people live in his house, but it doesn't tell you their names. So it's hard to tell who all was living there. I can make some guesses based on what I already know, but I don't know for sure. So some of the other things that you can do with the census records, this is an example, and I like to show this to people, especially younger people, who think, oh, we've always had these beautiful nuclear families, mom and dad and 2 kids and dog and a cat. And this is, I believe, if I remember correctly, the 1920 census record. This is my great-great-grandmother. She's living with, even though it says a daughter, I'm pretty sure it's one of her granddaughters. One of her grandsons, who is a Kinney, who is not related to my Kinney family at all that I can figure out, one of her sons, her brother, and then her brother-in-law. So this was what made up their household in 1920. And I think as the more research I do, the more I see these kind of blended families, even back in the 20s and the 30s. So if we were to click on Louis Valliere and go and look at what his census record for this day looks like, so if you click on his name, it will give you the same kind of little readout here. You can see at the top, it gives you a couple different spellings of the name because, again, AI can't read real well. And then you learn a bunch of different stuff about him. So for example, he was a lumberjack. He was a sawer or a sawyer. So these are the different things that you can learn. And I think looking at the census is a really good place to start to kind of get a handle on who's in my family and how do I know these people. The next thing that we're going to look at, the next thing on the list, is the draft cards. Draft cards are available for World War I and World War II, and everybody did a draft card. If you were a man over the age of 18, even if you were in your 50s, you filled out a draft card. This one happens to be for World War II. Again, this is something that the AI has created for us so we can kind of get the information off the draft card. I actually like looking at the draft card because usually they're hand printed by the people who filled them out. So this is my actual grandpa filled this all out. And you can see in this case he's working for Lemke's. It tells you where they worked, 525 South 5th Avenue. I don't think that building's there anymore. It was there when I was a kid. So you can kind of get an idea. And who is the person that will always know your address? And in this case, it's his wife, my Grandma Edna. And they have the address on here. This is the building. This used to be the Schaefer store. It's actually literally right across the street from Grace United. And thankfully, someone has bought it and is doing something fun with it, so that's kind of fun. The next thing we're going to look at really quickly are the public records. We have the city directories at the library, and I know you guys have them here too, but they're not really digitized. I think up to 1930, I think, is kind of where we are. So again, if they are digitized, they're up there and they're available. Again, they're being read by an AI. So this is what it actually looks like on the page. You can see Ancestry has very nicely highlighted the person that I'm looking for, my grandpa. If you look at where I have that little tiny star where it says occupation, and it says student real. Okay, I have no idea what a student real is, and it wasn't until I actually blew it up really big down here. Ooh, let me go back. I went too far. Down here, that I realized that student real actually was a smoosh together of that he was a student. I believe he was at what is now Wausau East, and 111 Fleming Street was actually their address. And I don't have a picture. That building is no longer there. I believe it is a parking lot now. So this is one of the cases where someone just sold the building and it went away. And the other thing that I noticed going through some of these things is I had relatives that lived at 111 Fleming Street and then lived at another house in the neighborhood. And depending upon who needed what, they flipped back and forth between those two houses. So, and that's something that you might find out. Oh, now I'm going backwards. Oops, now I went too far backwards. Okay. So this is what the index to the public records might look like. And I wanted to show this one. This one happens to be for my mom who's passed away. But you'll notice if you look carefully that you will see that there is a Wausau address, a Round Rock address, another Wausau address, and another Wausau address. So my mom passed away at the very end of 2018. And when I moved out, I was living with her in her house on Parrott Lane. And when I moved out, I moved into this address down here, 1221 South 50th Avenue, apartment 12. And I just transferred all her mail with me, so that's why we have that one. My sister Janet lives in Round Rock, and my mom would spend usually between 6 and 9 months out of the year down there with her grandkids. And then I said to my sister, what's this address? whose address is that? And my sister Janet told me, though, that was an address where one of my sisters, I have 3 sisters, one of my sisters lived there, and my mom had to sign off on the lease agreement. And so that is probably why she's listed as having that as an address. Okay. So I just skipped over the 1920 federal census because we've seen what a census record looks like, and we're now down to Find a Grave. Find a Grave is a really nice website where people actually go around, take pictures of the grave site, and then list any of the pertinent information that they have. So in this case, you can see that this is my grandpa's grave site. I know it's in, I can never remember the name, Pine Grove. And if you flip around and looked on the other side, my great-grandparents are buried, so they're buried back to back. They bought 5 plots. And when my dad died when I was quite young, he was able to be buried in their 5th extra plot. That's my grandma. She was the kind of person who planned ahead for no matter what happened. So if we take and we go to the link right down here, it will take us to the Find a Grave website. I like Find a Grave for a multiple number of reasons. They list family members, which is the primary reason. And you can see these people are blue. You can click on that and you can go to that person's Find a Grave website page. So I will show you. This one doesn't have as much information as I might like, but it does have quite a bit of information. So if we were to link out with my, my Uncle Butch there, I didn't know that his name was Don for years. And one time we got a Christmas present and it said Don Jr. on it. And so I gave it to my grandpa, and my grandpa said, "No, really, Julie, this is your Uncle Butch." And I'm like, "Oh, I get it now, okay." So on my Uncle Butch's, you can see here that they do have his obituary. That's the big thing, is that I would say maybe 25 to 30% of the Find a Grave pages actually have an obituary, which is incredibly handy. Obituaries usually give us a death date, sometimes a birth date. Very often it'll give parents, brothers and sisters, and children. And so you can take all of that information and put that in your family tree. And then you've got that information that you can then verify through census records or something like Find a Grave or anything else like that. Okay. We're now going to take a quick look at the Social Security Death Index. They don't actually give you a picture of the death index, but it does give you all of the pertinent information. And one of the pertinent pieces of information is his Social Security number. A couple of times when I've done this, people have said to me, "Oh my gosh, Social Security number out there, open, available for anybody." The Social Security Administration does not reuse Social Security numbers. So once you pass away, your Social Security number is retired. We also found out that the first 3 digits of your Social Security number up until about 1973 indicated what zip code you lived in. So my 3 sisters that I'm closest to in age, we all share the first 3 numbers, and then the rest of our Social Security numbers are pretty close together. So it was kind of funny when I was doing my mom's estate, and I was like, "Oh, look, we're all really close together as far as these go." I think what it was is my mom requested all of our Social Security numbers at the same time, and that's probably why that happened. Okay. So these are 2 people that are not related to me. I always just kind of bring them up because you are going to find things that are not people that you're related to. They're not going to be your relatives, and you can just skip right over them. The next ones, so the death records, the Social Security Death Index, there's information there, but you don't get to see the real live record. So there's no scan of the record. It's just something that they've generated and put out there. So I just wanted to give you kind of an idea. This is a birth record. Basically just gives you a birth date. A lot of times when people come to the library and they ask us to look up obituaries for them, This is one way that if you don't know the death date of the person that you're looking for or the birth date of the person you're looking for, we can find it using Ancestry, and we've been pretty successful, I would say about 75% of the time. So usually we can find you in there and figure out a birth date and a death date. So this is, I just ran down to the courthouse one day and I got an uncertified copy of the actual birth certificate. What I found was really interesting is that everything else that I had read about my grandpa said that he was born in Eland, which is in Shawano County. It's like right over the county line. But in this case, his birth record actually says that he was born here in Wausau, and I believe he was born in the hospital, which was oh no, he was born at home. My grandma was born at the hospital. So that's kind of an interesting thing to kind of see those differences that show up. This is, and I like to show people a death record. If you've never seen what a death certificate looks like, I have copies of my mom. So this is her in the obituary index. And this is a copy of her certified death certificate. So if you need to let somebody know, hey, so-and-so has passed away, you need to get the certified copy. So this, and it kind of covers some of the basic things. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit quick about newspapers.com. Newspapers.com, and by no means am I advocating for them, they are the only ones that have the Wausau Daily Herald available, but it's only available through the personalized version that you pay for. It doesn't show up in our library version, and I have tried. I have really tried to get that to happen. But all these are obituary indexes that say, hey, look, here's an obituary. You can go out and find it, where this person is listed and all of that. Okay, so I just put a little thing in here, newspapers.com. I do have a subscription to newspapers.com. It's about $90 every 6 months, so about $200 a year. It is a good place to look up obituaries, marriages, death notices, and occasionally, this is my great-grandpa's first wife, divorce notices. I did not know that my grandpa had a first wife. He died about 20 years before I was born. And when we would go to the cemetery, I would see this grave for this young girl whose last name was Schaefer. Her name was Hilda Schaefer. And she was their daughter. She died at birth or shortly after birth. So she was born around 1917-ish, 1915-ish, and she passed away. I always wondered who she was. Now I know. So the other thing that I really, really like is that a lot of the older papers will have these society pages where you can learn whether or not your grandparents or great-grandparents were card sharks. In this case, here's my great-grandpa winning at Schafskopf. And that the DAUV is the German Workmen's Help Association, something like that. So, and this is the one for my family that I find the most often, is that they're getting together and playing cards. But it was news, and so it showed up in the newspaper. And so these are some of the things that you can kind of find. Yep, yeah, the sheep's head, yeah. So, okay. Oh, I'm going backwards again. All right. So this is an example of, again, where the AI has pulled out an obituary and has misspelled names terribly. In this case, my Aunt Mary is a Wiederheft, not a Wiederhefli. Over here, my dad's name is Tom, not so you can just kind of see where some of those things can really trip you up if you're not paying attention and thinking, oh yeah, an AI read this, this really is my family. Okay. Marriage records. This is my grandparents. This is their wedding day picture. And then I think that's probably like their 40th anniversary picture. When I go to Ancestry and I look at the family trees, I am amazed at the number of people that I do not know who have a picture of my grandparents' wedding anniversary picture. I have no idea how they got it. I don't even know how they're related to me, but there it is. And then one of the other things I wanted to show you is This is actually from the microfilm. I actually went into our microfilm collection at the library. I knew what day they were married, and I was able to find their wedding announcement. Now, we remember wedding announcements are maybe, this long. This one has, not only what the bride was wearing, what the bridesmaids wore, that it was done on a Friday night, and it was a candlelight service, and what both sets of grandmothers wore, and it's amazing the amount of detail that you find. The other thing that I discovered is the woman who was my grandmother's sort of bridesmaid, she only had one, happened to be her cousin Lois. She had talked about this lady Lois for my entire life. I had no idea who this person was. Now I know. They were really close. I think they must have been really close in age. My grandmother she used to work up at Old Wausau North in the sterilization and processing unit, and her cousin was one of the county nurses here in town, so obviously they had a lot to talk about. Okay. One of the other things that you can find in Ancestry are work records. This will only work if one of your relatives had a licensed occupation. So barbers, watchmakers, boxers, education people, and what they don't tell you is nursing, which I think is probably a bigger one for people in this area. They don't tell you that nursing was also one of those things, so I was kind of surprised when I found my dad's work record. So here's the entry in Ancestry. He went to the Milwaukee Institute of Technology. We have a great picture of his graduating class. I haven't gotten a chance to scan it in, but it's about 50 women, my dad, and one African-American guy. And that's their whole class was majority women. So this is kind of a nice thing. So you can actually get in up close and see. Here they actually list addresses where the person was living. So this is another good way, if you don't know and you know that somebody was a nurse or a doctor or a teacher, that you can find their work record and you can track their addresses. My sister, who happens to be a certified nursing assistant and now a licensed practical nurse, was really curious to see all of the different things that you can be as a registered nurse that you can work in. My mom's work record, she was a registered nurse, has, she can do medical nursing and surgical nursing and OBGYN and all of those. And my dad was an LPN. He eventually became a surgical tech. Okay, so yearbook pictures. Our yearbooks, up to 2,000, are available online at the Central Wisconsin Digitization Project. I'm currently in the process of digitizing all of our local history from the library. This was the first one that I did. So if you want to look at them, you can go to the Central Wisconsin Digitization Project. We're right there on the front page. It's Wausau High School, Wausau East, Wausau West, and DC Everest. If anybody knows the folks at Newman, I've been trying to get a hold of them so I can do theirs, but I don't ever hear back from them. So, okay. So these are yearbook pictures from my mom. My mom went to an all-girls Catholic school in Milwaukee. And in previous versions of this, all I found were these things over here for my mom. And this is her senior graduation picture. Marquette, at some point, she went to Marquette College or Marquette University for a nursing degree. But between graduating from high school and going to Marquette, she joined the convent. And she was still in the convent when she graduated 8 years later. And so that's her college graduation picture. We all like to say, all decked out. And I actually had to call my sister because they don't list her as Kathleen A. Gutman. She's listed under her name that she got when she became a sister. She's Sister Ann Joaquin. And so my sister Janet was like, oh yeah, Mom told me that was her name. And I'm like, all right, so that's my mom. But to me, it's just amazing that you can find all of this. When I first found this, I was like, holy Toledo, this is so fun. Okay. One of the other things you can find in Ancestry are family trees. Family trees are probably 90% created by other users. So there are always errors that creep in. And this is the place where I looked at all these people and I'm like, how did you get this picture of my grandparents. This is so weird. So this is, if you go into Ancestry and you click at that very bottom there, it'll say family trees. And you'll see that it'll give you everybody, kind of. You'll find Donald James Kinney. My grandpa is right at the top there. And you can see on the bottom it tells you how many people are in the family tree. In this case, there's quite a few. The records and sources that are attached to that. So this is just another example from different people. And again, these are the people that have pictures of my grandparents. And I'm like, where did you guys get this picture? I have no idea. So this is one that I really want to draw your attention to. So I was 19 when my grandma passed away. And it happened to be on April 1st, so April Fool's Day. I'm at work. I was working my job to get through college. And my sister Joyce, who's the next in line after me, called me up and she said, Grandma died. This isn't an April Fool's joke. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. So as I was looking through these family trees, what I found was, and there's a person who, again, I don't know how they got that picture of my grandparents, and they're listing everything the same up until they get to the point where they have my grandmother dying nearly 12 years later in Fond du Lac. And I'm like, okay, you guys, this is not the same person. And this is what you run into very often in these user-created family trees, is that they'll find someone, they've got the right name, it's about the right age, and they'll just stick that in there. And you, being the grandchild or child, can look in that and say, no, that's not right. So I don't need to necessarily use that. And I did put, these are her wedding announcements, her obituary. The joke that we all had was that it lists no visitation, and the joke that we all heard was that my grandma's funeral was by invitation only, because she didn't want everybody to show up. So you had to get an invite. So my parents, this is a picture of my parents at their second wedding. They eloped and went to South Dakota to get married, because at that time South Dakota was the closest place you could go and apply for a marriage certificate, and you didn't have to wait 6 weeks. The other thing that my mom said is that my dad had a bunch of jokers for friends, and that they probably would have made their wedding day not what she would have wanted. I suspect, just from having read some other things, that there probably would have been some chivalry going on, and my mom would not have been happy about that. So what I wanted to look, they got under pressure from both sets of grandparents. They had a second wedding celebration about 5 months later on the 14th of February, so it was easy to remember. So I'm curious, I wanted to see how Ancestry showed this. Okay. So, I went backwards again. Okay. So I'm just doing this quick search with my mom. So my mom's obituary comes up, and there it shows her marriage as being February 14th, 1970 in Rothschild. Now, my antennas have perked up because I know that they got married before then. So this is her actual marriage announcement, and all it says is that they were married on November 7th. They don't say that they ran away to South Dakota to do it. So there's a discrepancy in there. As you can see, it says that they were married November 7th. The obituary says a different date. And then this is the actual record from South Dakota. Yep, Robert, South Dakota. My mom always said, oh, we got married in the county vault. And when I got married, I said to her, is there anything you want me to carry you down the aisle? Something that will remind you of your own wedding? And I listed off a couple of things, and I ended with car keys. And she gave me a look. I said, well, So you can see that there's always going to be some discrepancies, but usually, and I like to term it, you're trying to figure out what family stories you have are true or not. And this is one of those where we were able to prove, oh yeah, for sure, they ran away and got married. So now I'm going to give you some oversight of some other websites, or an overview of some other websites. This is Family Search. Family Search is a free website. You're able to see a lot of the same information that you'd see in Ancestry. Again, some user-generated content, including pictures and family stories. And it's a genealogy resource guide is available there at Family Search. So this is one of the things that I'm trying to remember, 1930-ish, WASA did sort of a big celebration, and they invited people down to the library to be interviewed. And all of these, I know they are scanned in here, but they're not online. These are online at Family Search, but they're very hard to look through because it's not been indexed. So you literally have to go through a page by page to see. And then it's about a 4-page document. So these are sort of the 2 front pages from that document. I believe this is actually a relative this is my great-grandma's sister. And so this is something that I want to show you again about verifying details. So my guess, although I do not know for sure, the person who gave this interview did not know very much about his wife's father. He says, he drowned, he was a sailor, he was from Norway. The only thing they got right was that he was from Norway. Over here is a page from the Old Settler's Guide to the Town of Easton, I think. And they have a complete obituary in here because we were the Lund family. We're related to Jerry Lund, if you guys know Jerry. We are the other side of that family. And so they have a very complete description and biography. I remember being about 8 or 10 and my grandma showing me this page and saying, look, these are your relatives, these are the people that you're related to, this is where they came from and this is how they got here. So when I refound this page, it was really exciting for me. But then to compare the two and say, you know what, this is the one that I'm gonna, oops, I'm gonna go back one. This is the one that I'm gonna rely on and not this other one here, which seems really strange. So then this is just an example of what your family tree looks like. They go the long way. And I'm gonna show you something with my grandpa on my mom's side, excuse me. So if you click on him, you will get, again, a similar page. If you click up at the top, there we go, it'll say memories. And if you click on memories, my sister has uploaded this beautiful picture of my grandparents, which is a very nice picture. So those are out there and people can, you can look at them and share them with other people that you're related to in a really easy way. Heritage Quest is an Ancestry product. It's a similar search form, it's free. It allows you to search within specific databases rather than aggregating results the way Ancestry does. So you can see you can look in the census records, you can look in military records, you can look at the city directories, you can look at immigration records, wills and probate, things like that. And again, very similar to the way we saw us starting with Ancestry. Family Echo has been my go-to family tree creator. It's really easy to use, has some very basic information, and you get this kind of a tree. And then if you can see some of the dotted lines, that will be where their part of the family is. So you can, narrow in on specific parts of the family, or, you can get kind of a big, broad picture. So, and that's also good for just trying to remember who people are and who they're related to. The way that you fill it out is there's a little information box, and you can put in the death date and the birth date and some other information, and it generates this little box here. GeneNet, which I have only just started working on, but there are records in Ancestry that will take you out to GeneNet. In this case, you can see somebody has been working on my great-great-grandmother's family tree. I believe her parents she was possibly born in Lac du Flambeau on the reservation. I don't know for sure, but she does have some Native American blood, so that's going to be a challenge to track down. So this person has sort of started that, being a library person in libraries. I really want to see what her proof looks like. Here's one where we can see that she has Ethel Kinney listed as a sister, but she's actually her granddaughter. I went through and looked her up and found that, but that was one of those things where I went, oh, that's not one of the kids. That's got to be a granddaughter somewhere, and it was. So again, user-generated content, there are always errors. I shouldn't say always, but most of the time. The one thing that I do want to talk a little bit about are land records. These are available from the General Land Office at the Bureau of Land Management. There's, in your packet, or in the handouts, there's an article that explains how to search and read in plat maps, which is different than anything you've ever done before in your life. If you go to this website and you look at the land patents, you can see that I filled in very little information. I filled in Lund and that it was the state of Wisconsin. And these are my results. So I don't know any of the people here. I don't know any of these people down here. I do know the two people in the middle. Christian Lund is my great-great-grandfather. Martin Lund is that other side of the family. And then it gives you the dates, which documents. This is the meridian, and it's based on that particular timeline. And then from here it goes into which township, which range, what are the allotments in which section, and which county. And this is what it looks like. So if you look way up, this is the 1901 plat map from Marathon County, which are also available online at the Central Wisconsin Digitization Project. And you can see there's his little tiny 40 acres up there. And from everything that I've read and I understand, his brother owned the land immediately across the street from them. So if you're interested in plat mapping or going out and looking for these things, this is something that you can use. Okay. So other online resources, of course, we have the National Archives. They are the big ones for military records and for immigration and naturalization records. For a lot of it, it has not been digitized, so you do need to probably go to Chicago. You can also request things online. For example, I requested my dad's draft card for the Vietnam War, and I have not gotten it yet, and I did that about a year ago. So you can see it's going to take some time for those things to come through. The Internet Archive is one that I have just recently stumbled upon. They have a very large genealogy collection. It's not very well organized, but it does include passenger manifests, family genealogies, marriage, divorce, death, census records, and Native American census records. But you can see that they have quite a few larger libraries that have contributed to this. So it can be overwhelming to look through. But if you maybe break it up and try it over a couple of different times, you might be able to find what you're looking for. The ProQuest guide is just how to use some of the different the different websites and what's available on each one. It's just kind of a nice place. If you're starting out and you want to get some more information, you can just try going to ProQuest. Reddit, which is a community group, they have a genealogy page. Again, it's just a place to get advice. I'm stuck. I can't get beyond 1863 with this family. Does anybody have any ideas where I can go or where I can look? And that's helpful. I think a lot of people love to share their knowledge and help them figure out where things are or where they can look for things. As far as specific ethnic groups, here are some things for Native American records. Tracking Native American records, personally, I have found really difficult because the overwhelming majority of the things that are online have to do with the southern half of the United States. There are things online for Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. They're a lot harder to find, and they're more difficult, I think, sort of to read and look at. They don't often record if people had a Native American name that they went by, oftentimes they had an English name and they used them sort of interchangeably, but in the rolls, oftentimes you will just see their Native American name, and that can be difficult to match up with other records that you might have. So some for the African American, if you have African American family that you want to trace, there are a couple of good places to look for. For Latino, Latina, or Hispanic, that one hasn't really been as fully developed yet, but I have a suspicion that over the next 20 years, the things for this particular group of people will really increase and we'll see more finding aids. And then of course, check Ancestry's resource page. They have a page on minority groups as well. And of course, the Wisconsin Historical Society has genealogy webinars, workshops, and classes. You can always attend those. And my final thought is, you're kind of writing a research paper, and it can cover many different countries and tell many different stories. But in the end, you're telling your story about your family. And I think that's really important. And one of the things that I encourage you is to talk to your older relatives if you have them around. Get those family stories down on tape or down digitally so that you can share them with people younger than you or with the rest of your family. There are so many things that my grandparents told us stories about doing from here in Wausau that I only remember little pieces of. That makes me really sad that I wasn't able to kind of get those down on paper before those people disappeared. So I really encourage people to do that. But I just think it's a great way to understand world history and the history of your family and how the two are intertwined. So thank you. This is my phone number. You can always call and leave me a message. You are welcome to email me at the library. I am more than happy to do some basic genealogy. If you want to get together with me one-on-one, I can help you get started and maybe help point you in some directions. So just call and make an appointment. So, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? And if you do, can you use the mic?
I don't think that was one of the things that I sent over, but if you want to drop me an email or give me a phone call, I am more than happy to put together a packet for you. If I'm doing a similar presentation, basically the same thing, just a little more expanded, at our Hatley branch at the end of June, and usually for those I have like a 100-page packet that I give out, because I do include I include all of the forms and the resources and then copies of the slides as well. So if you want to come to that one, you get the big packet.
Do you have any recommendations of where to go when things are written in German?
I do know, and I'm not going to get their pronunciation right, there is a Pomeranian group here. I know I see everybody nodding from the Historical Society. They're the ones that I would go to if I had German that needed translating. I don't remember exactly what their name is, but I know
it's the publisher of Orion Central Wisconsin says that we have, I believe, some information up at the front desk that we can, if you're interested in knowing, we have some of their newsletters and some information on how to get in touch. And maybe there are hours for the research library they have that in Berlin.
Yeah.
Just an FYI, the Wisconsin State Genealogical Society is having their fall conference in Wausau.
Ooh, that's good to know.
And I believe it's about the 1st of October.
Okay.
They have a website, so you
Yes.
can
Ooh, I'll have to
that
go
out.
check that out for sure. Yeah. Thank you.
I was looking, I might possibly have a half Native American sibling. I was trying to find that information a while ago, and it didn't occur to me that I'd have to go on property that's Native American. So what would you suggest of that?
Like actually visiting property?
No, just like documents.
Documents. And it was a sibling. That's going to be a little bit harder. I know, so one of my sisters had a child when she was 15, 16, and she did give the child up for adoption through Catholic Charities. But I do believe, even as far away as we were, she had to get sign off from the tribe. So you might want to start with Wisconsin Catholic Charities and see what you can find out. I know finding adopted relatives, whether they're adopted into your family or adopted out of your family, can be really tricky because a lot of times those records are closed, and they're closed for a certain number of years. If it's from this area, I would start there and see what you can find out. I haven't done a lot of research in that area, so I don't really know. I've done a little bit for people. I've had a couple of people who've come in and tried to find things for adopted relatives, and it's really hard. It's even hard for us to find things, so that might be the place I would start.
You mentioned lots of resources for people that are from this area.
Mm-hmm.
Are those resources available for people who are transplanted here and don't have any history in this area?
Yes. So you can use similar resources. How do I want to say this? So Ancestry is nationwide, worldwide. So Ancestry, you can go anywhere. Most public libraries have a subscription. And you can drop in at any public library will probably have if not an outright genealogy librarian, they will have somebody whose interest leans that way and will be able to help you out with those kinds of things. As far as being transplanted, many of my relatives on my grandpa's side actually were from New York and West Virginia. And so as you go further back, you start to find them other places. So yeah, that can be harder. The further back you go, the harder it is to find records, and the harder it is to be able to definitively say, this is my family. So some of the things, even some of the websites that we've listed, even some, and I don't want you to think that the family trees are a no-go, because they do contain a lot of really important information that you might not be able to figure out on your own. And so it's always good to kind of look and see what those other people kind of, who they've included and who they've not included, and what kind of relationships they have in those family trees, because they do provide some good clues for where to go and look next. But I never take them as the be-all and end-all. There's always going to be some errors or mistakes where people hoped for something, and if they did their research and this is what they came up with, and then when I do my research, I come up with something different, then it's going to be relying on what do I know about my family already to say definitively, yep, this person is completely wrong, versus this person has, they're doing it the right way, or they've got something down right. So I think it becomes very subjective after a little while. But yeah, any of the websites, Ancestry, Family Search, all of those are going to be useful to you. One of the things, let me see if I can go back here. If you look, at this is Family Search, you'll see that everybody has a number. It's like a weird combination of numbers and letters. That's their record in Family Tree. And so if you click on that record, it will bring back all of the information that everybody has sort of aggregated about that person. And that's another place where you can A, find clues, and B, find errors. But A, find clues is kind of, I always try to look at it that way. It's like I'm looking for clues about this person. And I have those little bits of stories that grandma and grandpa told, or you heard something from your aunt. So rely on those a little bit. You know your immediate family better than other people, and that's why when I see the portrait of my grandparents, I'm like, how am I related to you people? I don't know who you are. So yeah, this is a really good way. Like if you don't know for sure, would be a place I might start and see if I can find that person. But I'd also start in Ancestry too. This is Family Search. Yeah.
Just as a curiosity, are people willing their genealogy records to the genealogy librarian sometimes? Because if your family doesn't want all of this paperwork that you've collected, and you don't have anybody to give it to, what becomes of it?
It depends on your heirs. I've talked to a couple of different people. I talked to Jerry Lund recently, and I did say to Jerry, if you ever want to, give your stuff to me, I'm more than happy to caretake it for you. My aunt on my mom's side is also big into genealogy. She's gone out to Salt Lake City a couple of times. And I said to her, I will take it. The other thing is if you can find someone in your family that really wants it, you can pass it on to them. But mostly, we at the library generally don't take them unless they're complete or there's something, So what we have at the library is we have the Alfred Straub genealogy collection, for lack of a better word. He did a bunch of genealogies for the area around Marathon City. And I remember because I've looked through them all, and we were in the process of digitizing them and getting them up online. And I remember I said to my volunteer who's helping me with this, if you've lived in Marathon County longer than 3 generations, you're related to all the rest of Marathon County. Because just from looking through those books, you can see here's one family, and they're in 3 different genealogy books, and everybody is, we also have people who have done sort of those written genealogies, and I've reached out to a couple of people, and they've been very gracious about letting me digitize those and have those available. But it has to be something sort of complete, like in a book, before we can really do anything with it. I don't know, how do you guys feel at the Historical Society?
Very similar for us. We have a fairly large collection of individuals who have given us the research, but we don't want a banker's box full of notes and correspondence. We want something that make it easy for someone to actually go through it. So
Yeah.
usually a binder or a book or something like that helps.
Yeah.
But there are some repositories like the County Historical Society here that would possibly be interested in taking.
Yeah, I know. I have offered some of our genealogies to the Library of Congress, and they've been very interested. But that might be someone that you can start reaching out to and looking to see, hey, I have this repository of stuff. Where can I put it? And if your family isn't necessarily just from Marathon County, look at the other counties where they might be from. Like I said, half of my family is from the Milwaukee area, so I would probably, if I was going to look to put a different place, I would probably look down there.
I'm not sure if the State Historical Society has a fairly large genealogy. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know what they have either. Yeah, I know that they have some of the Straub collection, but none of it has been digitized that I can find. So that's kind of my project right now. If you pick up I have a handout that has books and websites and some other interesting things for Marathon County genealogists. You'll see on there that it has town histories and family genealogies. I'm hoping that those will be online through the Central Wisconsin Digitization Project by the end of 2026. So it's a process. I have one person who comes twice a week for 4 hours, and God bless her. Without this, it would not have happened. But yeah, I'm very excited about what is going to eventually be available online for people, and I'm hoping that other libraries will be willing to do the same. So.
Hello, I suspect there's an older member of my family, now deceased, born a long time ago. I believe she may have had a child, let's call it an unofficial child, before she married, and that child might have been adopted. How would I go about finding that?
Ooh, see, and I ran into the same thing for a while when I first started this out, and we saw that one that one family where it was all of those people living together in one family, and it said daughter and granddaughter. I, for a while, based upon things that my grandma said to me when I was a child and when I was a grown-up-ish person, that I sort of suspected that there was an illegitimate child. And I sort of suspected that it was this Evelyn and Morris. I have since found out that she was actually married to somebody. And they were married for a very short period of time and got divorced very quickly. But it might be one of those situations where this child was farmed out to another family member, in which case they should still show up on the census record. So I had one, this Alex child. I thought, oh no, wrong person. This Alex Lund, I found him, or his name, on several other census records, but living with a different family. And so it took me a little bit of time. I had to write down birthdays and death dates and figure things out to realize that they both had a child named Alex, that it was not the same child over and over. So yes, I do think that happened quite frequently, where there would be an unexpected child that was probably given either to grandparents on one or the other side of the family, or like I said, farmed out to another family member, whether it was a cousin or a great aunt and uncle someplace. Again, adoption records are harder to find, just because a lot of them, they went through an orphanage or an adoption agency that doesn't exist anymore, or they went through, it wasn't an official one, money changed hands or something happened. So I think those things are a lot harder to find. And so far I've been fairly lucky that I haven't run into that, even though, like I said, I've had some suspicions that happened. This is one of those situations where it was clear that grandma had 2 of her grandkids living with her for whatever reason. And I've often said it doesn't matter, it takes 2 people to raise a kid. If it's grandma and grandpa, or if it's mom and grandma, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, the first thing I would do is I would check with other family members and look at census records from around that time and see if that child maybe shows up.
There was no one knows anything about this. It was a closely held family secret that I found out accidentally.
Oops.
And all the older folks,
They're all gone. Yeah, and that may just be one of those family mysteries that we never figure out. Whoever has.
If it was that my mom was in the same circumstance, I'll get it after she passed, and I'm not promoting Ancestry, but I did a DNA search, and I was actually able to trace the family with DNA.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to suggest too. Ancestry has a whole nother thing, and I had the DNA test, and they give you hundreds of relatives, which then you can go the opposite way and come from this way and find relatives. So there's hundreds of people that you don't know are your relatives that are your relatives.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really good. I didn't even think of that. But yes, the DNA, I have seen many people who have said, oh, DNA helped me find, half brothers and half sisters, grandmas that I didn't know I had, or, I thought that my older brother's dad was, our dad, but it turns out he's actually somebody else. So yeah, I'm tempted to kind of dip into that. That's kind of maybe my next step. So I haven't quite got that far yet. But yes, I'm very curious. I kind of want to know. It's working at the library. I have met people that I'm related to that I didn't know I was related to. So that's been interesting when you're in that sort of public-facing position where you see everybody.
Any more questions? Are we good? Okay, well, Julie, thank you so much for being here. How about a nice round of applause for our speaker?
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me. This is wonderful. It was a great opportunity for me.
Thank you. Okay, so on the back, we have some handouts from Julie that you had referred to, so please feel free to pick those up. We also have surveys back there because we love to get your input, not just about how awesome your presentation was, but also if there are other topics that you would like us to cover, feel free to put that on there as well. And if you feel so moved to donate, we do have a jar back there, and we use those funds to also pay for future programming, future speakers. So we appreciate that. I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good holiday.